and today we get to talk about somatic experiencing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so for you, what was your first, do you remember what your first exposure to SE was? How did you find out about it?
Yeah. I would say it was a little bit of a journey to get there. I had sort of done, in my personal sort of experience, had done, talk therapy and things like that. And I actually like didn't have great experiences with talk therapy. It was part of what made me get into becoming a therapist. And I ended up finding this Reiki practitioner. And it was I'm like very heady cognitive type, and so it was very like out of the box for me to meet with her. But it was really transformational. It was a lot of like getting in touch with the body, sensations, emotions, what's being held in the body. And I learned so much and grew so much with her that really like opened the door for me to somatic work. And so when I went to graduate school, I knew I wanted to be a therapist, but my program didn't have any somatic pieces to it or techniques. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I just really was kind of on the hunt of like, what is a way that I can bring somatic work into the therapy space, because it's just so powerful when that element can be present. And so I really kind of just looked at a few different programs. I was looking at sensory motor, I was looking at Hakomi and somatic experiencing. And yeah, I just ended up taking sort of a guess on somatic experiencing, and I joined a wait list. They didn't even have openings at the time. And it actually worked out like as perfect as it could. Of right as I was moving, I think it was like 3 weeks before I was moving back to Colorado, they told me a spot had opened up and there was a training like in 4 weeks of like when I was going to be coming back. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do somatic experiencing.
Was when you went through the training, did it kind of, did it more or less sort of match your expectations from
Mm.
your previous experience, or was there anything that like, I don't know, really stood out to you or was kind of transformational or aha in the going through the training? Do you remember?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds like cheesy or like a promotional ad to say it, but it's like it was life changing. Like to do the training like on a personal level and professional level was just incredibly life changing for me, of just understanding things and making sense of things. And yeah, I very much had the experience going through it where I was like, this is what has been missing in the type of work that I want to do with clients, or in understanding myself and the experiences that I've had. And so it felt like a lot of clicking together, like boxes coming together. And it felt like a building off of the Reiki work that I had done, because, obviously Reiki is a different modality.
Sure.
But we were working with what was showing up in the body and ways to help things move through. And so it felt like a really cool foundation that then when I got to the somatic experiencing training, I got to build off of that and really get like a lot of framework and structure of ways to work with the nervous system and ways to bring that piece into the therapy space. Yeah.
Is when you meet someone and they don't know what somatic experiencing is and you're trying to describe it, what's your how do you explain it to somebody who doesn't know what it is?
Yeah, with the clients where it's sort of that first introduction, the way that I typically sort of describe that is we're bringing in the lens of our nervous system and the body into the space, right? So kind of how talk therapy, it has, a lot of focus on cognition and, behaviors, thoughts, feelings, the way that those all interact with each other.
Sure.
When we're talking about somatic experiencing, what we're really doing is now bringing in the body lens or the nervous system lens into the space, which means we're going to be checking in with and tracking what's happening in the body. And as we're talking about things, what are we noticing that's happening inside? And then being able to start to track that, make sense of that, and work with, sort of that content on a body-based level, if that makes sense. And then, sometimes with folks, we'll talk a little bit about the different nervous system states, right? So fight, flight, freeze, shut down, and what it might look like in a session to start to kind of get to know those different states and how they show up in their system.
When you think, SC is, there's, it's a method of working, but it involves some, sort of some concepts and some
Mm.
things that are unique to it. not only the nervous system lens like you're sharing, but even some of the methodology like titration and pendulation and just some of the kind of the framework that we have. I'm wondering, is there any SE concept that you kind of like, or that you're willing to like explain to us for a second?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I would say one that I tend to use a lot in my work with folks, especially when we're first starting out, is the piece around orienting. And I think I tend to work a lot with folks who kind of hang out in that freeze space or the disassociation space. And so orienting can be really, really important and really helpful in terms of ways to be able to come back into the here and now a little bit in a way that feels safe.
Mm.
Right. And so I think that is one that I work a lot with folks. And I mean, we certainly could do a little orienting practice if we want to.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Show us how it works. Yeah, I'll be your guinea pig.
okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I will start out a session this way, right? And so really what it is I'll tend to kind of explain it a little bit first, and then we can do it together. Or if you'd like, I can just kind of hold the space while you try it out. So whatever sort of the preference is, we can do. But yeah, basically, when we're talking about orienting, what I mean by that is us taking a little bit of time to check out the physical space that we're in. And I often give the invitation that it's a little bit less for the brain, this exercise, and it's more for the body, right? Of letting the body take a little bit of time to get oriented or check out the room that we're in. So I'm happy we could do a little bit of it together,
Yeah,
or
let's do a little bit. Let's do a little bit together.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, to start, basically what we do is just start to look around the physical space that we're in. And you might notice if there's any particular colors or textures that feel nice to look at. And again, this is really just an opportunity for the body to get to take a little bit of time to check out the space that we're in, which can let the body know that it's safe enough to take this little bit of time to just check out what's here.
I'm gravitating. My walls have kind of an interesting texture that I don't normally pay that much attention to, but for some reason it's kind of capturing my attention right now.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I have a window over on this left side, and it's like a painted wood blind, like the blinds are like a painted wood, and it's a really cool texture to look at.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a little bit of an example, right? Is just kind of taking a few moments of checking out the physical space, getting oriented to it, and it can help the body to know that it's safe enough to take the time to just
Yeah.
really check out what's here.
Yeah, that's one of the impactful things. I mean, I use it virtually every session, and I also use it just for myself. It's
Absolutely.
just become part of my own habit, so to speak. And I always notice sort of the effect of settling my system and whatnot. I guess unless I was in a threatening environment, but fortunately, usually I'm not. Normally, I'm in a safe environment. So
Yeah. And it's one of those, I think it's kind of cool because it's like the brain can sometimes get to a space where it's like, well, I know where I'm at. Like cognitively, we know, but there's something that happens, right? When we take that time of like, yeah, there's a plant here and there's a window here, and like actually let ourselves get kind of acquainted and like check out what's here. It can
yeah,
help the body to be able to feel a little bit safer in the space or feel more here. Yeah.
yeah, great. Um, you mentioned, I'm sort of thinking about, kind of what are some of the situations and types of clients or client concerns where you're really leaning into somatic experiencing as the primary element. I mean, you mentioned working with people with freeze or shutdown, um,
Yeah.
from your perspective, what are some of the common situations your SE is helpful for with your clients?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say I really use a blend like of the dare attachment work with parts work with SE. So in some ways, it's like I'm kind of always seeing the interconnectedness of all of that. But yeah, certainly, I think when bringing in that somatic lens or the somatic experiencing lens is yeah, so often around pieces of event trauma or even like relational trauma where something happened that shouldn't have happened, or being able to do some of that completing of self-protective responses, or impulses that show up in the system that maybe didn't get to have room to be there. And so I think that certainly shows up, and somatic experiencing can be so helpful with that. And then like I mentioned, especially the freeze and disassociative space, like I'm happy to mention, like, I had a lot of disassociation personally, and it wasn't until I got trained in SE where it was so just like, oh my God, like that makes so much sense what's happening. And I used to be so scared of that space and that state. And I feel like somatic experiencing can be such a cool way of like helping us understand what's happening and the information that our body is giving us in a way that we don't have to feel so scared or out of control around it. It's protecting us. It's giving us
Yeah.
information about what's going on. And so that I think is a lot of the, sort of that somatic piece that I bring in of when we move into disassociative states, or, feeling less present, feeling less here, or in that sort of like freeze space where there's conflicting impulses showing up or multiple things showing up in just that state of overwhelm. And
Mhm.
so somatic experiencing can be so helpful, just kind of giving the space that we maybe need to let some of that thaw a little bit, and then be able to separate those responses and work with them individually versus the experience of it's just all too much and feels really overwhelming.
Yeah. I resonate with that idea of that even just the framework of SE, some of the explanatory aspect, the map of our autonomic nervous system, or even with DARE, the language around our attachment system and how that connects to our nervous system. I sometimes think of it as sort of like we're these complicated neurobiological machines that have evolved over millions of years, but we didn't exactly come with an owner's manual. And it seems funny, but like it seems funny, but like there's actually a lot to learn about sort of the workings of our nervous system, what's going on, why is that happening, and so to me, that's one of the big elements of this work as well. Is just is understanding what your system is doing, and then it gives you options for. I mean, besides just typically calming and regulating the system, even that knowledge piece can help normalize certain things and also give awareness and choice in situations. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So much. Yeah. And empowerment, right? Of just like our bodies are speaking to us, they're giving us information. And so when we can start to learn the language of our body, it can be so empowering of just like, oh, yeah, I know what's happening in my body and in my system,
right.
versus, when we don't sort of have that scaffolding or framework, it can feel really overwhelming or out of control feeling. Yeah.
Great. Well, is there anything SE related that you don't think we've touched
I
upon?
think one of the pieces certainly that I talk with my clients about too is sort of that like completing self-protective response piece, which can be a really cool way of working that's unique to somatic experiencing, right?
Do you want to just explain that really briefly, like kind of what that
Sure.
how that shows up? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, oftentimes when we experience something overwhelming or activating or painful or traumatic, there can be sort of the, whatever is sort of the response that happens in the moment to survive it, right? Which makes sense. Our body kind of chooses, like we don't really get prefrontal anymore in that moment. Like body decides what will give us the highest chances of survival. And then the effect of that experience or the impact of that experience lives in our system, it lives in our bodies, right? And so because of the way, as humans, so often there's sort of this experience of move on, or I got to be okay, or I've got to move to this next thing. We don't always get the time and the space to really process what just happened, or allow our system to get oriented to the situation and then discharge or work through or move through how
Mhm.
that was, the impact, the effect of it. And so I think a really cool piece with somatic experiencing is, what I was just saying of the completing the self-protective responses is being able to go back to, okay, there was this experience that I had where it was too much too fast or it was overwhelming. And my body had some natural self-protective pieces that maybe didn't get to happen because the focus then became, I have to survive. I have to do whatever to survive this. And so what's cool is we get to go back to that and then tap into, yeah, what was there that maybe didn't get to happen that we needed to have happened or should have happened in order to move through or complete around that experience. And so, yeah, working with, the body, and it's kind of mystical the way that it kind of unfolds, but yeah, being able to complete those responses in the here and now that maybe didn't get to happen at that time.
Right. Yeah, and I sometimes think in terms of both sort of incomplete motor responses, or sort of motor response completion, and to me related, and Larry Heller calls it as emotional completion, which is
Mm,
also a neurobiological process. But this idea that on the emotional side, the situation may not have allowed for,
yeah,
either it was too fast, or you want, or or that wasn't allowed for some
yeah,
reason. The authentic emotion didn't come forward, yet the impulse towards it did. So
yeah,
then sort of the emotional completion could be connecting to that and allowing an expression or a resolution of that. But the motor completion side, I agree, is so unique to SE, and like the way that we kind of start to, like, even start to see things like, through somebody's gestures might reveal that, that there's some motor response that needs more full expression
yeah,
for the nervous system to have completed that experience, whether it was a surgery or a car accident or an attack or something like that,
yeah.
whatever it needs to complete those protective responses. But yeah, totally a unique aspect of SE, I think, too.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's something really, I don't know, there's something really profound about like it, even if it didn't get to happen in the moment, we can come back to it and be able to complete that finally, or finally meet that emotional need or complete that motor response, right? And it is different. It's different than, like what we needed in the moment or what, should have happened that didn't get to happen, or, that it's different than it not happening in the moment, but healing gets to happen even if it's, years later or months later, but oftentimes years later of finally meeting that need or finally allowing that response to be able to complete. And there's just something so cool and powerful about that to me, and inspiring of like we can always
Oh,
come back
totally.
to and heal around
Well,
it.
what's that famous Peter Levine quote? Like, trauma is a, it can, I
I
forget.
know that, I know there's
I
one
know,
of
I know the second part of it is, trauma doesn't have to be a life sentence or something like that.
right,
I can't
right.
remember the first part of it.
Yeah, I know there's one of like it's never too late to have the childhood that you wanted or the childhood that you deserved, or that sort of piece around the
Right,
healing.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree that I mean, that's to me what's so inspiring about this work. Always, always, it continues to be inspiring after, years now of doing it. Is that stuff that was hard, challenging, not so good, we didn't get what we needed. The degree to which, and I agree with you, it's not the same as going backwards in time and changing the history, but there is an unbelievable level of healing that is possible, and that's what keeps me for sure staying in the work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like the need can finally be met. The need can finally be acknowledged. Those responses can finally get some completion. It's so cool that it's possible.
So